The day my mother called to invite me to Grandpa's 90th birthday, I hesitated before answering. It had been years since I had attended a family gathering, and every memory I had of those occasions came wrapped in tension. Mom would take the spotlight, Dad would sulk on the sidelines. My sister Natalie would find a way to compare my life to hers. And I would usually sit somewhere in the corner, nibbling food and wondering why I bothered showing up at all. Still, something inside me stirred when she said, "It's his 90th. You can't miss it." Maybe it was guilt, maybe habit, maybe a small sense of obligation. Against my better judgment, I said I'd be there. The party was held in my parents' backyard. They had gone all out, stringing paper lanterns across the trees, setting up folding chairs, covering tables with bright but cheap tablecloths. There was polite music playing from a Bluetooth speaker. Champagne flutes in people's hands, children darting between legs, their shrieks mixing with laughter and polite chatter. To anyone else, it might have looked like a normal family celebration. But even before anything strange happened, I felt that familiar hollowness creep into me. I stood near the food table, pretending to be fascinated by grape skewers and cheese cubes, while my husband Roger lingered beside me with a glass of wine. He had the kind of face that always looked unreadable, polite, but distant, as if nothing could surprise him. Sometimes I admired that about him. Other times it irritated me. He was my anchor, but also my shield. He rarely revealed his own feelings, and I often wished he would roll his eyes or smirk when my family's absurdities surfaced. Instead, he just observed quietly. And his silence often unsettled them more than words ever could. Mom was in her element. Laughing too loudly, hugging people, reapplying lipstick every 30 minutes. She had organized everything and she wanted everyone to know it. Dad sat by the grill, grumbling to anyone who would listen about the weather, the food, the noise. Natalie avoided me as usual. I caught glimpses of her across the yard, her laughter sharp, her husband too loud, both of them trying too hard. We hadn't spoken properly in years. Not since she accused me of being selfish and of always thinking I was better than her. When Grandpa was wheeled out, everyone clapped as if a celebrity had arrived. His hair was neatly combed, his sweater vest pressed, his face serene. He looked exactly as I remembered, or at least close enough. But when I waved, he didn't wave back. He didn't seem to recognize me at all. My mother leaned over and whispered impatiently, "He doesn't talk much anymore. It's hard for him." I tried to dismiss the unease that prickled in me. He was old after all. Maybe dementia had dulled him. Maybe he simply didn't have the energy. But when I glanced at Roger, I noticed him staring at Grandpa, eyes narrowed, memorizing his face. "What's wrong?" I asked quietly. Roger didn't answer at first. Then he leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Get your bag. We're leaving. Act like nothing's wrong." At first I thought he was joking. Maybe he wanted an excuse to escape the awkwardness of the gathering. But when I looked into his face, there was no trace of humor. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp. "Roger," I began, confused. "Now," he said firmly, calm, but with an edge of urgency that made my stomach drop. "Smile, walk, act normal. But get your bag." I didn't know why, but I obeyed. We slipped inside, collected our things, and walked out without a word to anyone. No one stopped us. No one even seemed to notice. Once in the car, Roger locked the doors and gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles went white. "What's going on?" I demanded, my heart racing. He exhaled slowly, then said, "That's not your grandfather." The words seemed absurd, almost laughable. "What are you talking about? Of course it's him. He's old, he's frail." Roger shook his head. "No, I never forget a face. The man in that wheelchair, his ears are wrong. Too small, too low. The jawline, the nose doesn't match. That man is not your grandfather. The silence in the car grew heavy, pressing down on me. I wanted to laugh it off, to call him paranoid, but the certainty in his tone unsettled me. Roger had served in the military. He had been trained to notice details others missed. If he said something was wrong, something was wrong. I thought back. It had been 3 years since I'd last spoken to Grandpa directly. 3 years since I'd heard his voice. Every time I tried to call, Mom had an excuse. He was tired, he was sleeping, he wasn't feeling well. I told myself it was normal, that families drift, that old age made communication harder. But now, with Roger's words echoing in my mind, all those excuses began to look like bricks in a carefully built wall meant to keep me out. I picked up my phone and, with trembling hands, called the police. I felt ridiculous as I explained the situation, but to my surprise, they took it seriously. 2 officers arrived quietly and walked into the backyard. From the car, I watched as they spoke to people. Watched the mood shift from light to strained. Smiles vanished, conversations faltered. Mom gestured defensively. Dad stared into the hedges. Natalie flushed with something that looked like panic. The officers spoke briefly with the man in the wheelchair. For the first time that night, he moved his lips, said a few words, then nodded. I couldn't hear what was said, but I felt the air thicken with unease. One of the officers returned to us. "Can you stay nearby? We'll contact you soon." His tone was careful, his words chosen deliberately. They didn't confirm anything, but their silence said enough. That night, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was ragged, furious, on the edge of tears. "You called the police on your own family. Do you know what you've done? You don't understand. We did what we had to do for him, for all of us." My hands shook as I clutched the phone. "Where is Grandpa?" I begged. There was silence on the other end. For a moment I thought she might finally tell me. But then, with a sob that sounded almost rehearsed, she hung up. The next morning there was a knock on our hotel door. 2 officers stood outside, their faces grim. They asked to come in, and when they sat down, one of them spoke in a voice that seemed too gentle for the weight of his words. "Your grandfather passed away 3 years ago. Natural causes. Quietly at home." I stared at him, unable to process it. 3 years ago. That's not possible. "The party," the man in the chair, the officer nodded. "That wasn't him. Your family staged things. They buried him privately. No obituary, no funeral announcement. We're still trying to piece together why." My body felt numb. For 3 years I had lived believing my grandfather was still alive. For 3 years they had lied to me, kept me away, staged parties with someone else pretending to be him. The cruelty of it made my stomach twist as the officers explained further. The truth came out in fragments, each one cutting deeper. My grandfather had left everything, his house, his money, his trust, to me. He had made that decision quietly years ago, without ever telling me. My family knew, and they had done everything in their power to keep me from finding out. They had replaced him with my uncle, who was an actor, to maintain the illusion. They had controlled every detail, manipulated every absence. And I had swallowed their lies, believing I was simply the forgotten daughter. The one always on the outside. Now I realized I hadn't been forgotten. I had been deliberately shut out. The revelation that Grandpa had been dead for 3 years shattered me in ways I hadn't expected. At first I felt grief, raw and unfiltered, the kind I had been denied when I should have been mourning. I thought of the mornings I had planned to call him, the times I had promised myself I would visit soon, the unanswered questions I would never get to ask. But grief quickly turned to anger, a heavy, searing anger that burned through my veins as I thought about what my family had done. They had buried him in silence, cut me out of the process, staged birthdays and holidays with a stranger in his place, all to keep their secret intact. They hadn't just lied, they had stolen my right to say goodbye. The police launched a quiet investigation. They interviewed my parents, Natalie, and my uncle, who had been the one playing the part of Grandpa at gatherings. At first, my family denied everything. They painted me as unstable, a liar, a bitter daughter trying to stir up drama. But when pressed, the truth started to unravel. My uncle broke first. He admitted that, yes, Grandpa had passed 3 years ago, and yes, he had been asked to sit in during family events to maintain appearances. He claimed he had only agreed because he thought it was harmless, the way to keep up the illusion of normalcy. But the illusion had a purpose. Grandpa's will left everything to me, his estate, his assets, the family home, even a trust account I hadn't known existed. He had made that decision deliberately, quietly, years before his death. My mother, my father, and my sister had known. They had hidden his passing because if I never knew he was gone, I would never think to claim what was mine. They had continued living in his house, spending his money, and pretending he was still with them, while keeping me at a distance with excuses and guilt trips. The betrayal cut deep. I thought of every phone call where my mother told me he was too tired to speak. Every time Natalie told me I was overreacting. Every time I doubted myself for feeling excluded. It hadn't been paranoia. It had been deliberate. They had lied to me, not because they didn't care, but because they cared too much about what I would take from them. The courts became involved when the lawyer handling Grandpa's estate confirmed the will. Legally, everything transferred to me. My parents and sister had no claim. They fought it, of course, dragging out every argument they could find. They tried to prove I had been estranged, that I had abandoned the family, that Grandpa had been coerced into writing the will. But the documents were solid. His signature was clear. The lawyer who had drawn it up testified that Grandpa had been sharp, deliberate, and very firm in his wishes. He had chosen me for a reason. For weeks, my life was consumed by legal battles, police reports, and tense silence. Roger remained steady by my side, though I could see the weight it put on him too. Every night I lay awake replaying everything, wondering how I had been so blind. How had I missed the signs? How had I let myself be kept away from someone I loved? Eventually, the truth could no longer be denied. My family was charged with fraud and deception, though the punishment was lighter than I hoped. They avoided prison, serving probation and community service instead. My uncle, who had cooperated with investigators, received the same. It didn't feel like enough, but it was something. The estate was legally transferred to me, and they were forced to leave the house. They had been living in under false pretenses. The day I walked into Grandpa's house for the first time as its rightful owner, I felt a mix of sorrow and triumph. The air smelled faintly of old books and cedar, just as I remembered from childhood. The furniture was familiar, the walls lined with framed photographs. But the house also felt tainted by years of lies. My mother's perfume still lingered in the hallways. My father's cigar smoke clung to the drapes, and Natalie's laughter seemed to echo faintly in the corners. They had left quickly, taking only their personal belongings. But their presence haunted the space. I wandered through the room slowly, touching the walls, opening drawers, looking for traces of Grandpa. In his study, I found notebooks filled with his handwriting, little reminders to himself, grocery lists, memories jotted down. One line stopped me cold. Everything I have, I leave to her. She will do right by me. Tears blurred my vision. He had trusted me, believed in me, chosen me for reasons I would never fully understand. Perhaps he saw something in me that the others didn't. Perhaps he wanted to give me the freedom they had always tried to deny me. Whatever the reason, he had placed his legacy in my hands. And I vowed silently that I would honor it. My mother sent me a letter a week later. Her handwriting was sharp, almost angry. The ink smudged in places as though she had pressed the pen too hard. The letter was short, cruel, and final. You always were good at taking what you didn't earn. I hope you're happy. I read it once, then fed it to the flames in the fireplace. Watching the paper curl and blacken, I felt something inside me release. I had spent years craving their approval, bending myself into shapes to fit their expectations, doubting my own worth. But now, for the first time, I realized I didn't need them. I didn't need their acceptance, their love, or their lies. I had Grandpa's trust, and that was enough. The first night I stayed in the house, opened a bottle of wine and sat in his old armchair, the one by the window overlooking the garden. The silence was thick, but not suffocating. For the first time, the house felt like it belonged to me, not them. I thought about the parties, the laughter, the staged charades, and I wondered how many moments had been stolen from me. Yet I also thought about the future. About what I could build now that the truth was mine to carry. I haven't spoken to my parents or my sister since. Occasionally, I'll get a glimpse of them in town, their faces turned away, their bodies stiff with resentment. I know they hate me for exposing them, for taking what they thought was theirs. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if they also hate themselves, just a little. For the choices they made, living in Grandpa's house, I often feel his presence. Not in a ghostly way, but in the small comforts, the creak of the floorboards he walked on. The smell of the wood he polished, the garden he once tended. I talk to him sometimes, quietly, as though he can hear me. I tell him about the lies, about the truth, about how I hope I'm making him proud. The anger is still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it no longer controls me. I channel it into rebuilding, into reclaiming the pieces of myself that my family tried to erase. I fill the house with laughter, with friends, with quiet evenings that feel genuine instead of staged. Slowly, it becomes less a monument to what was stolen, okay? And more a sanctuary of what was given. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. Other times I wonder if I didn't go far enough. But whenever doubt creeps in, I return to that single line in Grandpa's notebook. She will do right by me. I remind myself that, in the end, that is all that matters. The silence in Grandpa's house was heavier than any noise I'd ever known. Every clock tick echoed like a reminder of how much time had been stolen from me, from him, from the truth. Sometimes I'd walk into the living room expecting to see him in his chair, newspaper in hand, glasses low on his nose. Instead, I'd find only dust motes floating in the sunlight, the quiet accusing me of being too late. My family's betrayal wasn't just about money, was about erasing the last years of my grandfather's life from me. They had buried him without me, staged birthdays without him, lied straight into my face. And for what? To buy themselves 3 years of comfort, 3 years of living in a house and spending money that never belonged to them. When the truth became public, the shame didn't stop them from trying to turn it back on me. My mother called me greedy. Natalie sent messages saying I had destroyed the family. But what family was there left to destroy? A family doesn't hide death from you. A family doesn't build a carnival of lies and invite you to clap along. They chose this. They chose deceit. They chose the mask over the man. One night, I dreamed of Grandpa. He wasn't frail, wasn't sick. He stood in the garden smiling the way I remembered from childhood summers and said, "You saw through it." I knew you would. I woke with tears on my face, but for the first time in months, they weren't bitter. They were cleansing. The inheritance sits untouched, mostly. I fixed the leaking roof, planted roses where Grandma used to, and set aside funds for scholarships in Grandpa's name. It's not about the money, it never was. It's about making sure his name lives on for something real. Not for a performance, not for a fraud. Sometimes I wonder if my family will ever try to come back. If they'll stand at my door with apologies rehearsed like lines in a play. And maybe one day they will. But if that day comes, I'll remember what Roger whispered at the party. The words that saved me from clapping for a ghost. That's not your grandfather. The truth is painful, but it's mine. And now, finally, so is his legacy.